Welcome to the Society of Professional Journalists video on headline writing. We'll look at some of the best practices and some tips for writing better headlines. Your narrator is Chicago area independent journalist and educator Stan Zoller.
Welcome to Headline Writing 101. I'm Stan Zoller, and for the next few minutes I'm going to give you some tips on writing effective headlines so your publication or website will help readers understand which stories they want to read. Let's start by looking at the four functions of a headline. The first is that it gets the reader's attention. That's because a headline is the second thing a reader sees on the page. The first is a picture, so you want to make sure you have a comprehensive package to guide the reader on your page or on your website. Secondly, it summarizes or tells about the article. It's important, however, to make sure that any information in your headline is also in the story. Third, it helps organize the news on the page. It guides the reader so he or she knows which stories are of interest to them or perhaps the most important. Which brings up item number 4, is that a strong headline will indicate the relative importance of a story, again, to guide the readers. It's important to realize there are two basic rules for headline. One, they must be accurate. Much in the same way as we want accurate reporting, we want accurate headlines. And secondly, they must fit the available space. Now let's take a look at some tips for writing strong headlines. The first, make sure the headline sells the article to the reader. Readers want to know why they should be interested in the story or why it's important. Use present tense. Very seldom would you use anything else. You want to use strong active verbs that add punch to your headlines and avoid the passive voice. That's because, much like we have our reporting be active and exciting, so too do we want our headlines. Avoid using forms of the verb to be unless for some reason they are very essential. What you want to do is be as succinct as possible with the words you use in your headline. Don't split things in your headlines, whether it's verb, proper nouns, prepositions, etc. Your readers get confused. Studies have shown that people read the lines of headlines as complete thought, and when you split it, you're breaking up their thought process. Make sure all your headlines have a subject or verb, even if it's understood or implied. We'll see examples of this later on. Don't repeat words. As we said, space is tight, words are tight. Keep your headlines as succinct as possible. Also, don't use articles unless their elimination confuses the reader. Like the previous two tips, they waste space and you want to be efficient in your headline. Don't repeat the lead in the headline. Write a better headline than the lead. That's because you want to give your readers some strong information in the headline, augment it with a strong lead so they're encouraged to read the entire story. If you have a feature story that has a surprise ending, don't put it in the headline because you're going to spoil the surprise. Let the reader find it for him or herself. Keep acronyms to a minimum. Only use those that are familiar to your readers. Conversely, the same is true for abbreviations. Watch out for ambiguity. Make sure you read a headline a second time to look for possible hidden meanings. We'll see some interesting examples later in this presentation. Avoid libel at all costs. Recheck all information that could defame anyone. Judgments are higher for libel in headlines because of their prominence. If you have questions about libel, check the Student Press Law Center at splc.org. Make sure the headline reflects what's in the story. Don't go beyond the story or sensationalize the headlines. Just stick to the facts. Let the story carry its weight on its own merit. Avoid bad breaks at the end of lines, such as dangling prepositions or conjunctions. Once you've written your headline, take a few seconds and give it a 4-part test. 1, make sure it's accurate. Number 2, is it clear? Do you understand it? If you want to play it safe, have a staff member look it over and see if he or she understands it. Is it proper in tone? Does it reflect the nature of the story? And does it have a twist? Is there some way you could add some flair to it or some spice? Have some fun with it when appropriate. Now let's take a look at some tips to let you go beyond the basics of headline writing. First of all, can you paint a mental picture with your words? The best way to do it is to read the entire story and find out what image comes into your mind. And then what you want to do is try and convey that in your headline. This is especially effective for feature stories. Specifics. Don't overlook the obvious, but you can enhance them. For example, a headline for a funeral service about a murder victim read, "Slain woman mourned at service." Well, I guess if you're going to a funeral, you're going to be mourning someone. But look for a touch of detail that tells the story. How many people were there? 1,500 people. So your headline now becomes 1,500 attend funeral for slain woman. That shows the magnitude of the situation and of the funeral. Emotions. Not every story is going to be emotional, but by reading a story, you may find a way to add some emotion to your headline. For example, a story about a woman who was robbed. She was carrying some holiday gifts. For example, it says, thief wanted gifts, she let him have it. So it's a play on words, but it brings in some emotion that she was pretty angry and she got even, supposedly, with the thief. So far we've been looking at what makes a good headline. The word, the tone, the accuracy, but it's important to understand that headlines are, as noted, a key to effective page design. It's incumbent for the layout editor to make sure the headlines work with the graphics to call attention to the story on the page. Remember, most surveys show that newspaper readers look first at a picture and then the headlines. So as previously stated, we want to make sure that they're a cohesive package to be not only attractive on the page, but effective in bringing readers into the content. So what are some of the common headlines? Here's some basic types that you'll see in most publications. The most common is a banner. It's a headline that goes clear across the page and tells a summary of what the story is about. The next is a hammer, can be used in news or feature stories. It's a large block of type with a smaller printout below it. Another one is a kicker, or called an eyebrow, which is a small line of type above a larger leg of type. There's a side saddle or deck, which is usually half the point size of the main headline, again offering a little bit more information. And the last one is a tripod, which has a large leg of type with two lines of type opposite it, vertically centered, about half its size. So here's how some of these news heads work. A single line head. New 9th grade center to open Monday. Plain and simple, easy to go. Remember, we want to keep it a little bit more active, so you want to keep it tighter. So we just changed it to say, new 9th grade center opens Monday. Nice and easy, to the point. It tells the basic story. A double line head, incoming freshmen look forward to 9th grade center opening. Plain and simple, 2 lines, to the point. Now let's look at some fundamental news heads. Let's start with a hammer. The story about the 9th grade center, our main line is grand opening, and then the printout is incoming freshmen look forward to new 9th grade center. The top line is 48 point, the bottom line 24. The next headline is an overline, also known as a kicker, and the kicker is district's newest building opens Monday, with the printout being freshmen look forward to new 9th grade center. Now let's take a look at a tripod. You can see the main leg to the left, grand opening, and the printout, 2 lines vertically centered with the leg to the left, incoming freshmen look forward to new 9th grade center. On the deck, new 9th grade center to open Monday is your main line, and then the deck is facility to house 500 students. Typically your deck should be 1 column, although it's not unusual for them to go 2 columns. The determining factor would be how many columns you have on your grid. On a website, you probably want to stick to a tighter scale so you don't put too much type on your page, confusing your reader. Every so often you're going to find there's some stories that need a lighter headline. Now, you can have some fun with them, but do it sparingly. You don't want every headline in your publication, on your website or whatever, to be clever, funny, or alliterative. But every so often, as I mentioned, some stories call for a clever headline. For example, the story about an inmate who fled county jail wearing only his boxer shorts. The headline was, inmate flees in boxers, but freedom is brief. How about the person who was arrested for stealing a bird? Cockatoo caper may turn shoplifter into a jailbird. Or if you're looking to buy a pet online, here's a headline that worked. To find a dog or cat, use your mouse. Animal theme throughout. And several years ago there was a strike by Major League umpires, and the hammer was the umpire strikes back, and then the printout local man becomes Major League umpire during strike. Now, we've said don't use the same word twice in a headline, but in this case, One's a verb, one's a noun. The umpire strikes back, but he did so because it was working during a strike. So let's think about writing some headlines. Here's a lead from the story. What headline would you write? Let's think about it for a couple of seconds. The magnitude of the story is the fact that 38 people were killed. You have to assume that not everyone's going to know where New Brunswick, New Jersey is, and we're not sure how many people would know Transglobal Airlines. So we'll take a standard news approach to this. So let's take a look at some of these headlines that are possible for this story. Taking a straight news approach. 38 die in New Jersey plane crash pretty much sums it up. For a local paper, it might be 38 die as plane hits homes in New Brunswick, because the proximity to readers to New Brunswick would probably be greater than on a regional or national or statewide basis. And finally, the standard New Jersey plane crash kills 38. Now let's take a look at this story. The key news driver in this story is that the City Council approved a $300,000 contract for road projects. You have to assume that no one knows who John Smith and Sons are, or does it really matter if they only submitted a bid unless it comes out later in the story. But here's some possible headlines you could put on this story. The first headline is a hammer. Simply says costly construction, with the printout City Council approves $300,000 for road projects. The next one is a simple banner. City Council approves $300,000 for street and bridge renovation, with the last one being a kicker, simply saying $300,000 approved, and the printout City Council gives okay for road improvement projects. As I've mentioned throughout this presentation, it's a good idea to reread your headlines before they're posted online or before you send your publication off to be printed. Here's some examples of headlines that the headline writer probably thought was a good idea, but in hindsight, needed a second read. This concludes the presentation on headline writing. I want to remind you of 6 things every headline writer wants to make sure his or her headlines achieve. 1, they get the reader's attention. 2, they summarize the article. 3, they help organize the news on the page. 4, they indicate the relative importance of the story. And 5, they're accurate. And 6, they fit the available space. If you have questions, feel free to email me at stanzoller@gmail.com.